Close your eyes, and settle into the quiet of the room. It is January of 1720, and you are a scribe in the city of London. Outside, a soft rain falls on brick and cobblestone. You have a long year of copying ledgers ahead of you, and you do not yet know that the numbers you will write are about to drift in ways no one has seen before. Let your breath slow. Let the rain become the only sound. And let us begin, very gently, at the beginning. The rain has been falling since before dawn. It strikes the tile roofs above your garret room and runs in thin streams down the window glass. The air inside carries the faint smell of coal smoke and damp wool. You have already broken your fast on a small loaf of bread and a cup of weak ale, paid for with 3 copper farthings from the pocket of your coat. You pull on your dark wool frock coat and button it to the throat. The fabric is still slightly damp from yesterday's walk to the office. You tie back your hair with a plain linen ribbon, as clerks of your station do. A powdered wig would cost more than a week of your wages, and you have never owned one. The walk from Lombard Street to Threadneedle Street takes roughly 10 minutes on a dry day. On a morning like this it takes longer. The cobblestones are slick with rain, and you must pick your steps carefully to avoid puddles that hide deeper holes beneath their surface. Rain patters steadily on the brim of your hat as you walk. You pass the chop house where you take most of your midday meals. A plate of boiled beef and bread costs 4d there, and you can sit by the fire for as long as you like. You have been a regular for nearly 2 years. You turn onto Threadneedle Street. The South Sea House stands on your left, a brick building of 3 stories with tall sash windows and a stone doorway. It is not the grandest building in the city by any measure, but it is solid and well kept. You have worked here for 18 months, earning £20 a year. It is enough to live on. And, if you are careful, you climb the 3 stone steps to the entrance and shake rain from your coat before stepping inside. The porter nods to you from his stool by the door. He is an older man with gray hair and a limp, and he always arrives before anyone else. You return the nod. You do not know his name. The staircase to the counting house is narrow and wooden. Your shoes make soft thudding sounds on each step as you climb. The air grows warmer as you ascend, carrying the smell of coal from the hearth on the floor above. It is the only warm place in the building at this hour. You reach the counting house and push open the heavy oak door. The room is long and high-ceilinged, with tall windows along one wall and a row of desks along the other. The desks are made of dark oak, worn smooth at the edges by many years of use. Your desk is the 3rd from the door. You hang your coat on a peg beside the desk and drape your hat over the same nail. The wool will dry slowly through the morning. You pull out the high wooden stool and seat yourself. The seat is hard, and you have learned to shift your weight from time to time through the long working day. Before you sits the first ledger of the new year. It is a large book bound in dark brown leather, with brass fittings at the corners. The pages are heavy paper, cream-colored and thick enough that ink does not bleed through. You run a hand along the spine. The leather is still stiff. This book has seen very little use so far. You take your quill from the wooden holder on your desk. It is a goose feather, trimmed to a fine point with a small penknife you keep in your pocket. Quills wear out quickly. You go through 3 or 4 in a typical week, and each costs a halfpenny from the stationer near the Royal Exchange. You dip the quill into the inkwell. The ink is iron gall, dark and slow drying. It leaves a brownish stain on your thumb and forefinger by the end of each day. You have learned to keep a small cloth nearby for wiping your fingers when the ink builds up. Rain taps against the tall windows beside you. The light is gray and even, good for writing. On bright summer days the glare from the street can make the work harder, but January offers no such trouble. The light will remain soft and steady until midday, and then fade slowly into the long afternoon. You open the ledger to the first blank page. The left-hand page already bears the heading written in a finer hand than yours. The chief clerk sets down the headings each morning before the rest of you arrive. Today's page lists subscriber names on one side and shares purchased on the other. The South Sea Company is a joint stock company. A joint stock company is a business owned by many people together, each holding a share of the enterprise. The company was formed 9 years ago, for the purpose of trading in the South Seas. The South Seas are the Spanish territories along the eastern coast of South America. In practice, very little actual trade has ever happened. The company's real work sits in these ledgers. You begin to copy. The first entry is a name, a date, and a number of shares. You write each letter carefully, in the neat copperplate script you were taught as a boy at the charity school. Your hand moves slowly at first, then finds its rhythm. The quill scratches softly across the page. The counting house fills gradually as the morning wears on. 3 other scribes work at desks along the same row. None of you speak much. The room is filled with the sound of quills on paper and the soft crackle of the coal fire at the far end. You know the other men by sight but not by name. You have never shared a meal or walked home with any of them. Mid-morning, a boy comes around with a pitcher of small beer and pours a measure into each man's cup. Small beer is weak and cheap, safer to drink than the water from the city pumps. It costs almost nothing and takes the edge off the cold. You nod your thanks and take a slow sip. The beer is slightly sour, as it always is in January. You think about your rent. Your garret room costs 3 shillings and 6 pence a week. You pay it every Monday morning to the landlady on the ground floor. She is a widow who keeps a very clean house and asks very few questions. £20 a year works out to roughly 7 shillings and 8 pence per week, before any deductions. Rent takes nearly half of it. The rest covers food, clothing, candles, and the occasional new quill. You set aside 1 shilling a week for new shoes and stockings and other small necessities. A pair of good leather shoes costs about 10 shillings and lasts perhaps 6 months of daily walking on cobblestones. You replace your stockings more often. The damp of London wears through wool faster than one might expect. A coal shifts in the hearth and sends up a small flurry of sparks. The sound carries across the quiet room. You dip your quill again and continue copying. The numbers on the page are small and orderly. Each subscriber holds 10 shares, or 20, or sometimes 50. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing that would make a man pause. You glance up from your work for a moment and look out the window. The rain has not slackened. People pass on the street below, their coats pulled tight, their hats pulled low. A hackney coach rumbles past, its wheels throw up arcs of water from the gutter. The city moves at its usual January pace, slow and damp and unremarkable. You return to the ledger. The morning stretches out before you in a long, even line of names and numbers. There is comfort in the repetition. Each entry is the same shape as the one before it. Each page fills at the same steady rate. You do not need to think about what you are doing. Your hand knows the way. Footsteps sound in the corridor outside the counting house. They are quicker than the usual pace of clerks moving between desks. The door opens. A young clerk from the director's parlor hurries past, holding a folded paper sealed with red wax. He does not look at any of you. He moves with the quiet urgency of a man carrying something important. As he passes your desk, you catch a fragment of what he murmurs to himself beneath his breath. The proposal goes before Parliament. The door closes behind him. The counting house returns to its previous quiet. The quills scratch on. The fire crackles softly. The rain continues its steady work against the windows. You dip your quill again and return to the page. The words linger somewhere at the back of your mind, soft and unformed. You do not know what proposal he means. You do not know what Parliament might decide. You are a scribe, and your work is to copy what is placed before you. The rest is not your concern. Outside, the rain falls on Threadneedle Street. It falls on the South Sea House and on the Royal Exchange and on all the narrow lanes between. It falls on the houses of merchants and the garrets of clerks and the stalls of market sellers. It falls evenly, without preference, on the first ordinary morning of what will prove to be a very unusual year. The January days drift by one after another, and soon it is the last week of February. The rain has lessened but not stopped. It falls now as a fine mist that settles on everything and leaves the cobblestones permanently damp. You arrive at the South Sea House at the usual hour. The porter greets you with the same brief nod. You climb the same wooden staircase and seat yourself at the same third desk from the door. The morning routine has not changed in 6 weeks. The first difference of the day arrives in the form of the chief clerk. He walks through the counting house at a slightly quicker pace than usual, carrying a rolled sheet of paper under one arm. He stops at each desk and says the same few words to each man. The first money subscription opens this morning. A money subscription is a sale of new shares in the company. Interested men pay a deposit to reserve their portion. The full sum is paid in installments across several months. It is a way for the company to raise new money, and for subscribers to own a larger piece of the enterprise. You nod and dip your quill. The chief clerk moves on to the next desk. The first subscriber arrives within the hour. He is a portly gentleman in a dark coat and a well-powdered wig. He is shown into the smaller room at the end of the corridor where the agreements are signed. You hear his voice through the wall, low and pleasant. He emerges 10 minutes later looking pleased, and departs without a glance at the counting house. You copy his name into a fresh page of the subscription ledger. Mr. Edward Harlow. 50 shares. Deposit paid. The handwriting of the agreement is the chief clerk's, neat and formal. You copy it into your own hand at half the size, line by line. Rain drips from the eaves outside and makes small pattering sounds on the stone sill beneath the window. A second gentleman arrives before midday. Then a third. By the time the beer boy makes his round, for names sit on the page before you. All are men of means. All pay the first deposit in gold guineas counted out across the oak counter in the next room. Once, through the half-open door, you see a subscriber count out gold guineas onto the counter. Each coin is heavy and bright. The clerk weighs them on a small brass scale before recording the sum. The process takes several minutes for a single deposit. You think about the price. Each share in the company costs roughly £128 at the start of the year. A man of ordinary means could never afford even one. The subscribers who walk through the door are merchants, lawyers, landowners, and members of Parliament. They move in a world you do not know. Wednesday brings more of the same. The names accumulate steadily down the page. You open a second page before the morning is through. The men who arrive are of different ages and different stations, but they all share the same quiet air of purpose. They know what they have come to do. You notice the deposit amounts are higher than you expected. The subscription price is set at £300 per share, paid in 4 installments across the year. The first deposit is 1/5 of that sum. You copy the figures carefully, 3 times each, to make certain you have them right. £300 is more than 14 times your annual wage. You cannot imagine holding such a sum in your hands. You cannot imagine risking it on a single piece of paper. These men do both, without visible hesitation. Footsteps pass more frequently along the corridor outside. The counting house door opens and closes with greater regularity. The room itself remains quiet. The quills scratch. The fire crackles at the far end. No one speaks above a murmur. By Thursday the queue begins to form at the top of the staircase. It is not yet long. 3 or 4 gentlemen wait their turn, standing politely, adjusting their gloves, making no conversation. They are men who are accustomed to waiting for things. They do not appear hurried. You copy the names as they come. Mr. William Thorne. 20 shares. Sir Richard Pembroke. 100 shares. Captain James Holloway. 30 shares. The names run together after a while. They become shapes on the page, patterns of ink that mean very little to you beyond the work itself. A coin clinks softly in the next room as a deposit is counted. The sound carries faintly through the wooden wall. The light from the windows grows grayer as the afternoon wears on. February days are still short. Darkness arrives before 5 o'clock, and the counting house must light its candles earlier than in summer. The tallow candles give off a faint smell of animal fat that mix with the smell of coal smoke and ink. You become aware of a gradual shift in the rhythm of the room. The chief clerk makes more trips between the parlor and the subscription room. The porter comes up the stairs once to ask whether additional benches should be brought for the waiting gentlemen. No one answers him directly. He brings the benches anyway. One of the scribes at the far end of the room is given a second ledger to fill. He is the fastest writer among you, and his page fills sooner than the rest. You hear the soft thud of a new book being opened an hour before the usual time. Friday morning arrives with a thinner rain and a longer queue. When you climb the staircase at 9 o'clock, 6 gentlemen are already waiting on the landing. 2 more stand on the stairs below. They hold their hats in their hands and stamp their feet gently against the cold. You take your seat and open the ledger. The page you left blank on Thursday evening fills before the midday meal. You turn to a fresh page. That one fills too. The names come faster now. You do not look up as often. Your quill moves across the paper without pause. Sometime in the early afternoon, the chief clerk posts a small scrap of paper on the board beside the door. It bears a single number written in his clear hand. You glance at it when you rise to stretch your legs. The share price has risen since the morning. You sit back down and continue copying. The number on the board is not your concern. You are paid to write names and figures, not to think about what they mean. But the figure stays with you, soft and unresolvable, at the back of your mind. It was lower when you arrived. It is higher now. The difference is not small. By late afternoon the queue stretches all the way down the staircase and out onto the ground floor landing. You can hear the murmur of voices from below, many more voices than were there at the start of the week. The sound rises through the stairwell like water filling a narrow channel. You finish the last entry of the day and blot the page. You close the ledger and set your quill in its holder. Your hand aches slightly. You have written more names in one day than you wrote in the whole first month of the year. The rain has stopped for the moment. A pale gray light lingers in the west. You pull on your still damp coat and make your way down the crowded staircase. The gentlemen waiting at the bottom step aside to let you pass. They do not look at you. Their attention is fixed on the door of the subscription room at the top of the stairs. You step out onto Threadneedle S. Street and turn toward home. The air feels cooler than it did in the morning. The cobblestones glisten under the fading sky. You walk slowly, as you always do, picking your way around the puddles. Somewhere behind you, the first week of the first subscription draws to a close. The ledgers hold more names than anyone expected. The number on the board sits higher than it did at dawn. And the week ahead, you quietly suspect, will be busier still. The weekend passes quietly, and Monday morning finds you walking to work along the same damp streets. The air holds the last of winter's chill. A thin rain falls intermittently, stopping and starting again without pattern. You reach the South Sea House and take your seat. The first subscription continues, but the pace has slowed since Friday. The queue on the stairs is shorter. You work through the morning at a steady rate, copying names into the ledger. Midday arrives. You pull your coat on and step out into the street for your meal. Garraway's Coffee House sits 2 lanes over, on Change Alley. It is one of several places where merchants gather to talk business and read the daily papers. You eat there most days because the food is plain and cheap and the fire is always warm. The coffee house is busier than usual. Every table near the fire is taken. You find a small table in the back corner, far enough from the main group that you can eat undisturbed, but close enough to hear the conversation. The room smells of roasted coffee beans, tobacco smoke, and wet wool. A haze hangs near the ceiling, thin and brownish. Men come and go constantly. Some stay for hours, reading newspapers or conducting business across small tables. Others drop in only long enough to hear the latest prices and leave again. On the wall near the entrance, several printed broadsheets are pinned up for anyone to read. They list the prices of stocks and shares from the day before. You have glanced at them from time to time but have never fully understood what all the names mean. You order a plate of boiled mutton and a dish of bread and cheese. The meal costs 6 pence, slightly more than the chop house but better on cold days. You pay the serving boy from the small leather pouch at your belt and wait for your food. A group of 3 merchants sits at the next table. They are talking in low voices about the South Sea Company. You try not to listen, but their words carry across the narrow space between the tables. They speak of a second money subscription. It is to open before the month is done. The price per share will be higher than the first subscription, set at £400. The terms will be easier, they say, with more time to pay. A coffee cup clinks against its saucer as one of the men leans forward. You chew slowly and think about the numbers. £300 for the first subscription. £400 for the second. The difference is £100 per share. That is 5 full years of your wages, added to the price in the space of a few weeks. You cannot quite wrap your mind around it. The merchants continue. They speak of men they know who have already made money on the first subscription, simply by selling their rights to someone else. You have not heard of this before. A subscription can be sold. It is not necessary to hold the shares to the end. There are ways to turn a profit in between. One of the merchants mentions a name you recognize from the ledger. A man who subscribed for 50 shares in the first week has already sold his place for a premium of £50 per share. He made £2,500 without ever paying the full sum. Another merchant at the table says nothing. He smokes his pipe and watches the room. You get the sense he has heard all of this before, and perhaps seen it end differently, in other years. You finish your meal and sit for a few more minutes by the fire. The warmth seeps into your coat. The conversation at the next table drifts to other matters. They speak of ships arriving from Jamaica, of insurance rates, of a new canal being dug in the north of England. The South Sea Company is only one subject among many. You stand, pull your coat tight, and step back out into the rain. The walk to the South Sea House takes 3 minutes. Your boots squelch in the puddles along Change Alley. When you return, the chief clerk is waiting by your desk. He hands you a fresh ledger bound in the same dark brown leather as the others. The second subscription opens this afternoon, he says. You are to start a new page. You take the book and set it on the desk before you. The spine is stiff. The pages are blank and cream-colored. You open it to the first page and sharpen your quill while the chief clerk writes the heading in his formal hand. Second money subscription. March, 1720. He finishes and moves on to the next desk. You dip your quill and wait. Rain taps against the window glass with a sound like small fingers. The first subscribers for the second list arrive within the hour. They are much the same sort of men as before. Merchants in good coats, lawyers with leather briefcases, gentlemen who have come directly from their clubs. They sign their names, pay their deposits, and depart with the same quiet satisfaction. You copy each entry into the new ledger. The numbers are larger. £400 per share instead of 300. The deposits are correspondingly heavier. You notice the brass scale in the next room is used more often now, and the weighing takes longer. You think about the two subscriptions side by side. The first list took a full week to fill its first pages. The second list is accumulating names at roughly the same rate, but at a higher price. The company is raising more money, faster, from the same sort of men. You wonder what the directors make owe. F it all. They come and go from the parlor at the end of the corridor, and their faces give nothing away. They are men who have spent their careers in finance and government. They know how these things move. A fly buzzes slowly near the window, trapped between the glass and the inner sash. It moves up and down, without finding its way out. You watch it for a moment before returning to your work. Your wrist begins to ache in the familiar way. You flex your fingers under the desk, out of sight. The ache is part of the job, as regular as the midday meal or the evening walk home. You have learned to work through it without complaint. By late afternoon the room has settled into its familiar rhythm. The quills scratch. The fire crackles. The door opens and closes at regular intervals. You have filled half a page with names and figures. The work feels much the same as it did during the first subscription, only the numbers sit higher on the page. A bell on the wall of the next room chimes the hour. The sound is deep and soft, and it vibrates faintly through the wooden partition. Toward the end of the day, two men arrive who do not quite fit the pattern of the others. The first is a haberdasher. He wears a plain coat, well kept but not new. His hands are calloused and stained with the dye of his trade. He carries a small cloth bag of coins and he counts them out carefully, one by one, as if each one matters a great deal. He has never owned a share of anything in his life, he tells the clerk. He heard about the company from a customer at his shop. You copy his name into the ledger. Mr. Thomas Reeves. 10 shares. Deposit paid. The second man arrives half an hour later, just before closing. He is a tavern keeper from a parish outside the city. His coat smells of beer and wood smoke. He speaks loudly and asks more questions than any subscriber before him. The clerk answers each one patiently. In the end, he signs for 5 shares and lays his money on the counter. You write his name beneath the haberdasher's. Mr. Samuel Broad. 5 shares. Deposit paid. You blot the page and set your quill down. You sit for a moment looking at the two names. They sit among the merchants and lawyers and gentlemen like stones of a different color set into a wall. They are men of ordinary work and ordinary means. They have found their way to this room, to this ledger, to this page. The counting house empties around you. The other scribes collect their things and depart. The fire at the far end of the room dies down to glowing embers. Outside, the evening rain falls more heavily than it did at midday. You close the new ledger and place it on the shelf with the others. It sits beside the book from the first subscription, nearly identical in every way. Only the numbers inside are different. You pull on your coat and walk down the staircase. The hallway is quiet. The porter wishes you a good evening from his stool by the door. You step out onto Threadneedle Street and turn toward home. The rain falls on your hat and shoulders. You walk slowly, picking your way around T. He puddles in the gathering dark. Somewhere behind you, 2 new names sit in a new ledger, and the second subscription has only just begun. March gives way to April, and the second subscription continues at a steady pace. The names accumulate in the new ledger at a rate not unlike the first. The queue on the stairs remains long but orderly. Nothing about the work itself has changed. The weather shifts in small ways. April brings softer rain and the occasional hour of pale sunlight. The air smells less of coal smoke and more of wet earth. The days grow longer by a few minutes each evening. You notice these things only at the edges of your attention. Your wage arrives at the end of each quarter, placed in a small paper envelope by the chief clerk. The full sum for 3 months is £5 exactly, minus 6p for the porter's customary gratuity. You count the coins carefully before tucking them into the leather pouch at your belt. £5 must cover rent, food, clothing, and candles for 13 weeks. One Tuesday at midday, you walk to Garraway's and find the coffee house filled with paper. Single sheets of printed paper lie on every table, pinned to the walls, passed from hand to hand across the room. They are prospectuses. A prospectus is a printed description of a new business venture, explaining what the company will do and how much a share will cost. You pick one up from the table beside your plate. It describes a company for a new diving machine. The machine will allow men to walk on the bottom of the sea and recover treasure from sunken ships. The paper promises great returns for anyone who subscribes. A share costs 2 guineas. A newspaper rustles on the next table as a merchant turns the pages. You set the diving machine paper aside and pick up another. This one describes a wheel of perpetual motion. The inventor claims the wheel will turn forever without any source of power. It will drive mills and pumps and machinery of every kind. The prospectus is printed on finer paper than the first, with more elaborate lettering. You read through the description twice. You are not certain how a wheel could work. The paper does not explain the mechanism in any detail. It only states that the principle is sound and that subscriptions are limited. A third prospectus catches your eye because of its plainness. It has no drawings, no elaborate heading, only a few lines of text. The company is described as, for an undertaking which shall in due time be revealed. Subscribers pay 2 guineas for a share and receive no further information until the undertaking is made known. You stare at the words for a moment. A man can pay money for something that has no name and no stated purpose. You have never encountered such a thing before. You fold the paper and set it down. Throughout the rest of your meal, you count at least a dozen different prospectuses on tables within your view. There is a company for importing walnut trees from Virginia. There is a company for making soap from human hair. There is a company for building hospitals for bastard children. There is a company for insuring horses, and another for insuring houses, and another for insuring ships. Some of the proposals sound reasonable. Others sound like nothing more than an idea written on a page and printed for anyone to read. All of them ask for money. All of them promise returns. The coffee house murmur rises and falls like water against a shore. You finish your meal and sit for a while watching the room. Men argue about the merits of one company over another. They compare prospectuses and quote prices. A few speak of selling their subscriptions to the South Sea Company and putting the money into these newer ventures instead. You listen without comment. 2 guineas for a share in a company with no name. 2 guineas is nearly a full week of your wages. You would not hand over that much for a promise written on a sheet of paper. But the men in this room would, and do, and speak of it as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. You stand and make your way out of the coffee house. The street outside is filled with the same papers. Boys stand on corners handing out prospectuses to passers-by. A man near the Royal Exchange calls out the names of new companies as he distributes sheets to the crowd. You walk back to the South Sea House through the April dampness. The rain has started again, fine and misty. It settles on your coat and hat without quite soaking through. You return to your desk and resume the work of the second subscription. None of these other companies have anything to do with your ledger. You copy only South Sea Company names and numbers. The other ventures exist somewhere outside the walls of this counting house, in the coffee houses and the streets and the minds of men who hope to turn a small sum into a larger one. Still, the thought of them lingers. You find yourself glancing up from the page more often than usual. The idea of a company with no name and no stated purpose stays with you. It sits at the back of your mind like a question with no answer. A coal shifts in the hearth and sends up a small spray of sparks. The afternoon passes. The second subscription list grows longer. The same sort of men come and go. The quills scratch. The fire settles. The light softens toward evening. You think about the word bubble. You have heard it used in the coffee house to describe these new companies. A bubble is something that looks solid from a distance but has nothing inside. It grows larger and lighter until it can no longer hold together. The men who use the word do not always say whether they believe these ventures are bubbles or not. They use the word the way one might describe the weather, as a thing that exists and must be observed. You have never seen a company fail. You have never watched money disappear into thin air. You have only copied ledgers, day after day, watching numbers go up and sometimes down. The idea of a venture that has nothing at its center is difficult to hold in the mind. Footsteps pass along the corridor outside, quicker than the usual pace of clerks moving between rooms. Toward the end of the day, a flurry of movement passes along the corridor. Several clerks walk together toward the director's parlor, carrying folded papers. Their voices are low and you cannot make out the words. One of the junior clerks returns a few minutes later and stops by the desk of the chief scribe. He speaks in a murmur. You are close enough to catch fragments. A petition. The directors. The other projects. You dip your quill and return to the page. You do not ask questions. It is not your place to know what happens in the director's parlor. Your work is the ledger, and the ledger waits for no one. But the words stay with you as you finish the last entries of the day. Suppress the other projects. You heard the phrase clearly enough, murmured in the corridor between one footstep and the next. You think about the prospectuses from the coffee house. The diving machine. The perpetual wheel. The company with no name. All of them asking for money, all of them promising something in return. You wonder what it means to suppress them. You wonder who has the authority to do such a thing. The counting house empties at the usual hour. You close the ledger and set your quill in its holder. The room grows quiet. Outside, the last of the daylight fades from the windows. You pull on your coat and walk down the staircase. The porter is not at his usual post. You pass the door of the director's parlor and hear voices behind it, several men speaking at once. The door is closed. The words are indistinct. You step out onto Threadneedle Street. The air is cool and damp. A few prospectuses lie scattered on the pavement near the entrance, caught in the gutter by the rain of earlier in the day. The ink has run. The words are blurred and unreadable. You turn toward home and walk slowly through the gathering dusk. Somewhere behind you, in the parlor of the South Sea House, men are deciding things. Somewhere in the coffee houses and the streets, other companies wait. And somewhere in between, the ordinary work of copying ledgers continues, one name at a time. April draws to a close, and May arrives with warmer air and longer days. The rain falls less frequently now, though it still makes its presence known most mornings. The petition you heard murmured about in the corridor has not yet produced any visible change in the work of the counting house. Word of the third money subscription circulates through the building in the final days of April. The price will be set at £550 per share. That is £150 more than the second subscription, and more than 4 times the price at the start of the year. The morning the third subscription opens, you arrive to find the South Sea House busier than you have ever seen it. The queue on the stairs extends all the way down to the ground floor and out onto the entrance steps. Men of every description wait their turn. Some look like merchants and gentlemen in fine coats and powdered wigs. Others look like shopkeepers and tradesmen in plainer clothing. A few you would not have expected to see anywhere near a share ledger. You push your way through the lower landing and climb to the counting house. The room is already in motion when you take your seat. Additional desks have been brought in overnight. 2 more scribes sit at the far end of the room, men you have never seen before. The chief clerk moves between desks speaking in quick, quiet tones. Everyone has been told to expect a heavy day. A murmur of voices rises from the staircase below and drifts up through the open door. You open the fresh ledger for the third subscription and dip your quill. The first subscriber of the day is shown in within minutes. You begin to write. Within the first hour, your quill runs dry. You dip it again and continue. 20 minutes later it runs dry a second time. You sharpen the point with your penknife and dip it again. Before midday it runs dry a third time. You have never gone through ink at this rate. The names come too fast. The entries pile up one after another. Her with no space between them. A boy of perhaps 12 years is hired that same morning. His sole duty is to walk among the desks with a large bottle of iron gall ink, refilling each inkwell before it runs empty. He moves silently from desk to desk, his bare feet making almost no sound on the wooden floor. He appears at your elbow 3 times before the midday meal. You wonder what the boy earns for a day's work. Perhaps 6 pence, or 8 pence. Enough for a loaf of bread and a cup of ale, and perhaps a penny saved for something else. He works steadily, his eyes on the inkwells, never looking at the ledgers or the men who write in them. He is part of the machinery of the room now, like the fire or the window light. The door to the corridor opens and closes so frequently that it never fully settles. Each subscriber who passes through the subscription room leaves a deposit. The deposits are larger now. £550 per share, with the first installment due immediately. Gold guineas pile up on the brass scale in the next room. You hear the clink of coins more often than you did in February or March. The sums are larger. The weight of them is greater. You try to imagine holding £550 in your hands. It is more than 27 years of your annual wage. It is a sum so far removed from your own life that it loses meaning somewhere in the calculation. It becomes a number on a page, nothing more. By midday the counting house is full to capacity. Every desk is occupied. Every ledger is open. The sound of quills scratching on paper fills the room from wall to wall. It is the loudest you have ever heard this room, and still it is a quiet sound, a soft and steady rustle like dry leaves in a gentle wind. You do not look up as often now. You keep your eyes on the page. Your hand moves on its own, forming the letters and numbers it has formed 1,000 times before. The names pass through your vision and onto the paper without stopping in your mind. You copy them the way a miller grinds grain, steadily and without question, one after another after another. The boy with the ink bottle passes again. You hear the soft glug of liquid as he tops up your inkwell. You do not look up. Your quill does not pause. Sometime in the early afternoon, the light from the windows dims. Clouds have moved in from the west. A fine rain begins to fall, streaking the glass. The room grows slightly cooler. The fire at the far end, which had been burning low, is stoked by one of the junior clerks. The room settles into a deeper rhythm. The scratching continues. The door continues its comings and goings. The rain falls more steadily now, a soft drumming against the sash windows. The rain falls outside. The fire crackles at the far end of the room. Somewhere in the corridor, a door closes softly. The quills go on scratching, steady as breathing. It is perfectly all right if your eyes have grown heavy by now. The ledgers will still be here when you return, and the story will wait patiently for you. The rain continues. The fire settles. The room holds its quiet warmth. Nothing moves quickly. Nothing demands attention. The numbers fill the pages at their own slow pace. You become aware, gradually, that the afternoon has worn on. The light from the windows has shifted lower. The queue on the stairs, though still long, has shortened. The boy with the ink bottle makes his final round of the day and disappears down the corridor. You dip your quill and finish the entry you are working on. The page before you is full from top to bottom with neat rows of names and numbers. You turn to the next page. It fills too. By the time the chief clerk announces the end of the day, you have written more names in a single day than you wrote in an entire week in January. You blot the final entry and set your quill in its holder. Your hand aches more than it ever has before. Your wrist feels swollen. You flex your fingers slowly beneath the desk, working out the stiffness. One by one, the other scribes close their ledgers and collect their things. The counting house empties more slowly than usual. Men stretch and rub their hands. No one speaks much. Everyone seems to share the same quiet weariness, the same sense of a day that was longer than most. A last log shifts on the fire and settles into glowing embers. Before you leave, you decide to add the column of new subscribers. It is not strictly part of your job, but you are curious. You count the names on the first page, then the second, then the third. You add the numbers together on a scrap of waste paper, working carefully with your pen. The total sits before you on the scrap. You look at it for a long moment. You compare the number in your head to what you remember from January. The first week of the first subscription produced a certain number of names. This single day has produced many more. You try to work out the factor, the number by which January would need to be multiplied to reach today's total. You cannot quite compute it. The number is too large. The difference is too great. Your arithmetic, never strong, fails you somewhere in the middle of the calculation. The figure sits on the scrap of paper, plain and undeniable. It means something. You are not sure what. You fold the scrap and tuck it into your coat pocket. You close the ledger and place it on the shelf with the others. The third subscription book sits beside the second and the first, identical in binding and size. Only the numbers inside tell the real story. You pull on your coat and walk down the now empty staircase. The porter nods to you from his stool. The entrance hall is quiet. The last of the subscribers have departed. The doors are being bolted for the night. You step out onto Threadneedle Street. The rain has stopped. The air is cool and clean. Puddles on the cobblestones reflect the last light of the day. You turn toward home and walk slowly, your hands still aching, the folded scrap of paper warm in your pocket. Somewhere behind you, the ledgers hold the names of a great many men. Somewhere ahead, the evening stretches out long and quiet. And somewhere in between, a single day of extraordinary work comes to an ordinary end. May gives way to June. The weather grows warmer. The rain comes less often, and when it does it is lighter and shorter. The third subscription continues, though the pace has settled from the extraordinary opening day. The scrap of paper you folded and carried home still sits in the lining of your coat pocket. You have not looked at it again. The counting house has found a new rhythm. The boy with the ink bottle makes his rounds at regular intervals. The 2 additional scribes hired in May have become familiar faces. The queue on the stairs is long most mornings but never again reaches the length it reached on the first day of the 3rd subscription. The work is steady. The numbers accumulate. Word arrives in the 2nd week of June. Parliament has passed an act concerning joint stock companies. The act restricts the formation of new companies that do not hold a royal charter. A royal charter is a formal document from the king that gives a company legal permission to exist. The new act also gives the courts power to dissolve ventures that operate without proper authority. Men in the coffee house call it the Bubble Act. You hear the news at Garraway's on a Tuesday midday. The room is quieter than it was in April. The tables hold fewer prospectuses. Some of the sheets that were pinned to the walls have been taken down. The ones that remain look older, their edges curled from the steam of coffee and pipes. A newspaper folds with a soft rustle as a merchant sets it down. You order your usual meal and sit at the same table in the back corner. The conversation runs to the same subject at every nearby table. Men discuss which companies will survive and which will be dissolved. Some speak of lawsuits already filed. Others speak of money lost on ventures that no longer exist. You listen and eat. The diving machine company you read about in April is one of the first to go. The perpetual motion wheel is another. The company with no name and no stated purpose vanishes without further explanation. The men who subscribe to those ventures receive their money back in part, or not at all, depending on who holds the funds when the company closes. You think about the 2 guineas those shares cost. 2 guineas is a week of work for you, or nearly. You would not hand it over for a promise on paper. Some men did. Now those promises are gone. The coffee house murmur is softer now, more thoughtful than it was in April. The air of excitement has settled. Men speak in lower voices. They choose their words more carefully. No one passes prospectuses across the tables anymore. Back at the South Sea House, the mood is different. The 3rd subscription continues. The shares climb higher still. The act that restricts other companies seems to have strengthened the South Sea Company's position. With fewer places to put their money, more men turn to the one venture that stands on solid legal ground. You notice the difference in the faces of the subscribers. They walk more confidently. They speak in more certain tones. The company has the backing of Parliament and the King. It cannot fail in the way the smaller ventures have failed. Or so the reasoning goes. You copy the names into the ledger as always. The numbers rise. The deposits pile up. The boy with the ink bottle still makes his rounds, though the pace has eased since the opening of the 3rd subscription. Your quill runs dry once or twice a day now, not 3 times before midday. A distant bell rings from a church tower somewhere beyond Threadneedle Street. The sound carries faintly through the open window. The days pass one after another. June deepens. The evenings grow longer and lighter. You walk home in daylight more often than not. The streets are busier in the warm weather. Vendors sell fruit from carts. Children play in the lanes. London feels more alive than it did in January. You pay your weekly rent to the landlady of your garret every Monday morning. 3 shillings and 6pence, placed in her palm on the stairs. She counts the coins carefully each time, though the amount never changes. You have never missed a payment. You have never been late. The arrangement is steady and reliable, like the ledgers. You think about the word bubble. You heard it in April, used to describe the smaller companies. Now those smaller companies are gone, dissolved by Act of Parliament. The South Sea Company remains. It grows. It prospers. It is not a bubble, the men in the coffee house say. It is the real thing. You are not sure what makes one venture real and another a bubble. Both ask for money. Both promise returns. Both exist on paper. The difference, as far as you can tell, lies in who stands behind them and what Parliament has decided to allow. A fly buzzes against the window pane, slow and heavy in the warm afternoon air. The price of South Sea shares continues to rise. The numbers posted on the board near the entrance climb week by week. Men who subscribed in January have seen the value of their shares increase several times over. Men who subscribed in February and March have done almost as well. The company seems to grow stronger by the day. You do not own any shares. You have never owned any share of any company. £20 a year does not leave room for speculation. You watch the numbers go up the way you might watch the tide come in, as something that happens around you but not to you. Toward the end of June, you are working late. The other scribes have left for the day. You are finishing the last entries from the afternoon batch. The counting house is quiet. Only your quill scratches against the paper. The fire has burned down to embers. The senior clerk passes through the room on his way out. He stops by your desk for a moment. He is an older man, gray at the temples, with hands stained from years of ink. He has worked at the South Sea House since the company was formed. He knows the ledgers better than anyone. He looks at the open page, then at you. He speaks in a low voice, as if the walls might be listening. He says some of the directors have been quietly selling their own holdings. Not all of them. Not all at once. But enough to be noticed by those who pay attention. He says it with an odd tone. Not alarmed. Not excited. Just observant, the way one might observe that the tide has turned or the wind has shifted. A fact worth noting, and nothing more. You do not reply. It is not your place to comment on the director's affairs. You nod and dip your quill and return to the page. The senior clerk stands for another moment, looking at the ledger. Then he nods once and moves on. You hear his footsteps recede down the corridor. The outer door closes. The counting house is quiet again. You finish the last entry and blot the page. You set your quill down and sit for a moment in the stillness. The words stay with you. The directors selling their own holdings. You turn the thought over slowly. The men who know the company best, who sit in the parlor at the end of the corridor, who see all the numbers and all the letters and all the arrangements. If they are selling, what it means is a question you cannot answer. You do not know. You are a scribe. You copy names into ledgers. You do not interpret. You do not speculate. You write what is given to you to write. Still, the thought lingers. It sits at the back of your mind as you close the ledger and put away your things. It walks with you down the staircase and out onto Threadneedle Street. The evening air is warm and still. The streets are quiet. Most shops and offices have closed for the day. A few lamps burn in doorways, their flames small and steady in calm air. You turn toward home and walk slowly. The light lingers in the sky. The day is not quite done. Somewhere behind you, the ledgers hold their numbers. Somewhere ahead, the month of June draws toward its close. And somewhere in between, a question has been placed in your mind that will not quite leave. June draws to its close, and July arrives with heat. The senior clerk's words from that evening linger at the back of your mind, but the work does not slow. The third subscription continues. The numbers on the board near the entrance keep climbing. Word of the fourth and final money subscription spreads through the South Sea House in the first days of July. The price will be set at £1,000 per share. That is nearly double the third subscription, and almost 8 times the price at the start of the year. The morning the fourth subscription opens, the air is already warm by 9 o'clock. You arrive to find the queue not only on the staircase but spilling out through the entrance and onto Threadneedle Street. Men stand in the sun, fanning themselves with their hats. Some have arrived before dawn to secure their place. The crowd is broader than it was in January or February. You see merchants and gentlemen, as before. But you also see shopkeepers and artisans and men who work with their hands. You see women, rare in previous months, accompanied by husbands or brothers. You see elderly men leaning on canes and young men barely out of their teens. Everyone has come for the same reason. The counting house is almost too warm by mid-morning. The windows stand open, but little air moves through them. Sweat beads on foreheads. The ink on the pages dries faster than usual. Your cuffs stick to your wrists. The smell of wool and dust and iron gall ink hangs thick in the still air. A murmur of voices rises from the street below and drifts up through the open windows. You open the fourth subscription ledger and dip your quill. The first subscriber of the day is shown in. You begin to write. The names come quickly. Faster than the third subscription, faster even than the extraordinary first day in May. The price is higher but the demand is greater. Men who could not afford shares in January can still barely afford them now, but they find the money somehow. They borrow. Tea. Hay sell other things. They arrive with bags of gold and notes of credit. The brass scale in the next room clinks and shifts constantly as deposits are weighed. Gold guineas and silver shillings pile up in trays. The sums are larger than any you have seen. £1,000 per share. 100 shares costs £100,000. You cannot hold the number in your mind for long. It dissolves into abstraction somewhere around 30,000. You copy names until your wrist aches. It begins as a familiar dull throb and deepens as the hours pass. You flex your fingers under the desk when you can. You shift your grip on the quill. The ache remains, steady and persistent. The boy with the ink bottle moves faster now. He refills inkwells at a quicker pace. The heat makes the ink evaporate faster from the open wells. He appears at your side 4 times before the midday meal. His forehead is damp. His bare feet make soft slapping sounds on the warm wooden floor. At midday you eat at your desk. The heat has driven most men indoors. The coffee house would be too crowded and too warm. You share a loaf of bread and a piece of cheese with one of the other scribes. The bread costs a penny farthing. You split it evenly between you. You sit and rest your wrist while you eat. The counting house is quieter for half an hour. The queue on the street continues without pause. You can hear it through the open window, a low continuous murmur of waiting men and occasional laughter. You think about the price. £1,000. 50 full years of your wages for a single share. Men pay it without hesitation. They speak of the shares doubling again before the year is done. They speak of South Sea as the safest investment in the kingdom, backed by Parliament and the King and the very weight of the nation itself. You do not know whether they are right or wrong. You have no way of knowing. You copy the names into the ledger and let the men speak for themselves. The afternoon wears on. The heat does not abate. Your wrist throbs with every stroke of the quill. You keep writing. The names fill the pages. The 4th subscription ledger is already thicker than the first was after an entire month. Each page holds the same neat rows of names and numbers. Each entry represents £1,000. A fly buzzes slowly near the ceiling, moving sluggishly in the warm still air. You notice, without being able to say exactly when you noticed it, that the quality of the signatures has changed. In January, most names were written in educated hands. Now you see more marks, more uncertain script, more hands that clearly do not write every day. The subscription has reached further down the ladder of society than it did at the start. Toward the end of the afternoon, clouds move in from the west. The light dims. A breeze picks up, carrying the smell of rain. The room cools slightly. The men in the queue on the street shift and murmur as the first drops fall. The R.A. begins in earnest as the workday draws to a close. It falls heavily against the windows and the roof. The sound fills the room, steady and drumming. It is the loudest thing in the counting house by far. The chief clerk announces the end of the day. You set your quill down with relief. Your wrist throbs. Your hand is stiff. You flex it slowly beneath the desk, working the stiffness out of each finger. The counting house empties. The other scribes collect their coats and hurry out into the rain. Most have umbrellas or cloaks. A few will wait under the awning for the worst of it to pass. You sit for a moment longer, looking at the ledger. The pages are full from top to bottom. The number of names on this single day defies easy comparison. It is the highest number you have ever written into a subscription book. It is the peak, though no one in the room says so. No one uses that word. No one thinks of it in those terms. You close the ledger and pull on your coat. You have no umbrella. You will walk in the rain. The porter wishes you a good evening from his stool by the door. You step out onto Threadneedle Street. The rain falls hard. The cobblestones glisten. Puddles form quickly in the depressions of the street. You turn toward home and walk at a steady pace, letting the rain settle on your coat and hat. The walk takes you through familiar streets. Lombard Street. Cornhill. The lanes that lead to your garret. The rain muffles sound. The world feels smaller, closer, quieter than it did at midday. Carriage wheels rumble past at intervals, their horses stepping carefully on the wet stones. You pass a coachmaker's shop about halfway home. The shop is closed for the evening, but a sheet of paper has been taped to the door. You slow and glance at it as you pass. It is a subscription list. Not for the South Sea Company. Not for any company you have heard of. The heading names a different venture entirely, something to do with a new method of carriage construction. The list already has several names written on it in different hands. You stand in the rain for a moment, looking at the paper. The Bubble Act was meant to put an end to these things. The smaller companies were dissolved. The prospectuses disappeared from the coffee houses. And yet here one is, taped to the door of a coachmaker's shop, collecting names and money in the rain. You continue walking. The rain falls. The subscription list recedes behind you. The question that has been sitting at the back of your mind since June shifts slightly, as if something has moved beneath it. You turn into the lane where you live. The light is nearly gone. Your garret waits at the top of the stairs. Somewhere behind you, the fourth subscription ledger holds the highest numbers you have ever written. Somewhere ahead, sleep waits. And somewhere in between, a sheet of paper taped to a coachmaker's door suggests that not everything is quite as it's. Eames. July's heat lingers into the first days of August. The fourth subscription continues, but the pace has changed. The extraordinary opening day does not repeat. The queue on the stairs shortens. Fewer new subscribers arrive each morning. You notice the difference gradually. At first you think it is simply the heat keeping men indoors. Then you think it is the natural slowing after a major opening. Then you realize it is something more than either of those things. The names come more slowly. The pages fill at a gentler rate. Your wrist, which ached so fiercely in July, recovers somewhat. The boy with the ink bottle still makes his rounds, but he moves at a slower pace. He refills each inkwell once or twice a day now, not 4 times before midday. He has time to stand by the window sometimes, looking out at the street. He was hired for a rush that has passed. Whether he stays on through September is a question no one has asked aloud. You pay a copper halfpenny for a glass of small beer at the chop house one lunchtime. The beer is weak and cool. It costs half what a proper ale would cost. You drink it slowly, letting the coolness spread through you. The afternoon will be warm again. A clock chimes somewhere in the building, deeper and softer than the bells outside. You overhear two directors speaking in the corridor one morning. They stand near the door of the counting house, their voices low. You catch fragments as you work. They speak of calls. They speak of unpaid installments. They mention names you have seen in the subscription ledgers, men who subscribed for shares but have not paid what they owe. A call is a formal request for the next payment on an installment plan. When a company issues a call, subscribers must send in the next portion of what they owe, or risk losing their shares entirely. Many men bought on the installment plan, paying only a deposit up front and promising the rest over time. You listen without looking up. The directors' voices are careful. The why do not sound alarmed. They sound like men discussing a problem that has solutions, if the right steps are taken. They speak of sending letters. They speak of deadlines. They speak of patience and of giving men time to find the money. You keep copying. The work continues. The pace has slowed, but it has not stopped. Names still arrive. Money still changes hands. The ledgers still fill, page by page. You dip your quill and write the next name and the next. The work is the same work. Only the speed is different. August deepens. The weather turns. Rain comes more often. The heat breaks. The counting house grows cooler. The windows stand open on mild days, letting in the smell of wet stone and coal smoke from the streets below. You return to Garraway's for your midday meal now that the weather has cooled. The coffee house is quieter than it was in July. Men still talk of South Sea shares, but the tone has shifted. There is less certainty. More hesitation. Some speak of selling. Others speak of holding on for the next rise. No one raises his voice. No one makes bold predictions. You sit at your usual table in the back corner and eat. The prospectuses are gone from the walls. The tables hold only newspapers and coffee cups. The bubble act did its work on the smaller ventures. What remains is the one great company, and the question of where it goes next. A spoon clinks against a ceramic cup at the next table. You return to the South Sea House after your meal and resume your work. The afternoon passes quietly. The names come at a steady but unhurried pace. You have time to blot each page carefully. You have time to sharpen your quill properly when it grows dull. You have time to look up from the ledger now and then, to rest your eyes on the window and the street beyond. Toward the middle of the month, you notice that the board near the entrance has not been updated for several days. The price posted there is the same one you saw 2 weeks ago. You mention it to no one. It is not your place to question the posting of prices. The 2 additional scribes hired in May spend more time idle now. They sit at their desks with their ledgers open and their quills ready, but fewer subscribers come to them. The 4th subscription has spread the work across more hands than it needs. No one says anything. No one is dismissed. The men sit and wait. The rain falls outside. The fire crackles gently at the far end of the room. A page turns somewhere down the corridor. The quills move across the paw. Pour, steady and slow. If you have drifted away somewhere between the lines of these ledgers, that is exactly where you ought to be. You need not catch every word. The numbers will keep. The rain continues. The fire settles. The room holds its quiet warmth. Nothing moves quickly. Nothing demands attention. The names fill the pages at their own unhurried pace. The second half of August passes much like the first. The subscription continues. The calls go out. Some subscribers pay their installments promptly. Others take longer. A few do not respond at all. The directors meet more frequently now. Their comings and goings from the parlor are more regular. The door to the corridor closes more often behind them. You do not ask questions. You copy what is given to you to copy. You record the names and the payments and the amounts owed. The ledgers tell their own story to anyone who knows how to read them. You know how to read them, in your own way. The columns of paid entries grow more slowly. The columns of unpaid entries grow longer. A penknife scrapes softly as one of the other scribes sharpens his quill. On the last day of August, you walk past the board near the entrance on your way in. The price has been updated. You stop for a moment and look at it. The number is lower than it was 2 weeks ago. Not by a great deal. Not enough to cause alarm in the men who pass by. But lower. The first time you have seen it move in that direction all year. No one comments on it. The other scribes walk past without stopping. The subscribers who arrived that morning do not mention it. The chief clerk says nothing. The porter makes no observation. The room begins its work as it does every morning, as if the number on the board is exactly what everyone expected. You do not ask. You walk to your desk and take your seat and open the ledger. You dip your quill and wait for the first subscriber of the day. The room is quiet. The rain has stopped. A thin sunlight filters through the windows. August is over. The fourth subscription continues. The number on the board is lower than it was. And no one has said a word about it. You begin to write. September begins quietly. The lower price you saw on the last day of August does not reverse itself. By the end of the first week, it has fallen again. The number on the board near the entrance moves downward by small increments, day by day. No one announces it. No one explains it. The number simply changes, and everyone sees it. Messengers hurry in and out of the director's parlor at all hours. They arrive on horseback or on foot, carrying sealed letters. They disappear into the parlor and emerge again minutes later, leaving with replies or departing for other destinations. Their footsteps are quick and purposeful in the corridor outside the counting house. You do not ask what the letters contain. It is not your place. You see only the effect they have on the room. The directors meet more often. The chief clerk is called away from his desk with increasing frequency. The boy with the ink bottle makes fewer rounds and spends more time standing by the staircase, watching the comings and goings. He has not been dismissed. He has not been reassigned. His work has simply diminished, the way work sometimes does. You pay your weekly rent on Monday morning as you always do. £3.06, placed in your landlady's palm on the stairs. She counts the coins carefully. The amount has not changed. It will not change, so long as you have the work and the wage to pay it. Some things in life hold steady while others move. One morning, the chief clerk brings you a new ledger. It is bound in the same dark brown leather as the others, but it is slimmer. You are told to begin recording transfers and sell orders. A transfer is when one subscriber sells his shares to another man, and the ownership changes hands in the company's books. A sell order is a request to find a buyer for shares currently held. You open the new book and dip your quill. The first entry arrives within the hour. You write the seller's name, the buyer's name, the number of shares, and the agreed price. The work is different from subscription entries. There are fewer names per entry, but each one requires more detail. You write slowly and carefully. Your wrist does not ache anymore. The pace is slower. The entries come one at a time, not in streams. You have time to form each letter carefully. You have time to blot each line properly. The ache of July and August has faded into memory. Your hand rests more lightly on the page. A messenger's footsteps pass quickly along the corridor, then fade toward the stairs. The counting house feels different now. The subscription ledgers are not empty, but they fill more slowly. Most of the new activity goes into the transfer book. Men who bought shares in January or February are selling them now, while they are still worth more than they paid. Men who still believe the price will rise again are buying. The shares change hands, again and again. You recognize some of the names on the sell side. Mr. Edward Harlow, who subscribed for 50 shares on the first day of the first subscription, appears as a seller of 20 shares at a price well above what he paid. He does not sell all of his holding. He keeps 30. You wonder whether he means to sell more later, or whether 30 is the number he is comfortable holding. The 2 additional scribes hired in May are reassigned to transfer work as well. Their desks, which sat idle for much of August, fill again with a different kind of entry. The room is busy in a new way. The energy has shifted from accumulation to movement. The numbers no longer only grow. They also move. Rain falls against the windows, steady and gray. September rain is different from summer rain. It is colder and more persistent. It carries the smell of approaching autumn and the damp of wet stone and coal smoke from the streets below. You think about the word transfer. It is a neutral word. It describes movement without judgment. Shares move from one hand to another. Money moves in the opposite direction. The company itself does not change. Only the names in the ledger change. The system is designed for this. It accommodates buying and selling as part of its ordinary function. A door closes at the far end of the corridor, a little harder than usual. The first week of September passes in this new rhythm. The price continues to drift downward. The messengers continue their comings and goings. The transfer book fills page by page. The subscription books fill more slowly. The boy with the ink bottle makes his rounds at the SA. Me unhurried pace he found in August. No one speaks of panic. No one raises his voice. The counting house maintains its quiet professionalism. Men come and go. Entries are made. Books are kept. The work of the South Sea House continues, as it has continued through every month of the year so far. Only the nature of the work has shifted. You eat lunch at Garraway's again. The coffee house is quieter still. Men speak in lower voices. Fewer tables are occupied. Some of the regulars you have seen for months are no longer there. You do not know whether they have sold their shares and moved on, or whether they simply stay away when the news is not to their liking. The newspaper on the table beside you lies unread. No one picks it up. The room holds its breath, the way a room does when everyone is waiting for something and no one knows exactly what. Toward the end of the week, a man comes into the subscription room you recognize from July. He was one of the men who arrived early on the first day of the fourth subscription. You remember him because he subscribed for 10 shares at £1,000 each, paying the full deposit in gold guineas that clinked heavily on the counter. He is paler now. Quieter. He stands at the counter and speaks to the clerk in a low voice. He asks what his shares are now worth. The clerk tells him. The number is lower than £1,000. Not catastrophically lower. Not by half. But enough to matter. Enough that the difference represents more money than most men earn in a year. The man simply stands there for a long moment. He does not speak. He does not argue. He does not ask to sell. He just stands, looking at the counter, as if the numbers written there have rearranged themselves into something he does not recognize. After a time, he turns and walks out. He does not look at anyone. He does not slam the door. He walks out into the corridor and is gone. You watch him go from the corner of your eye. You do not stop writing. The transfer entry you are working on continues beneath your quill. The room is quiet for a moment after he leaves. Then the work resumes. The quills scratch. The messengers come and go. The price on the board holds at its current number, for now. September is only a week old. The transfer ledger is open on your desk. The names continue to move from one column to another. And somewhere outside, a man who paid £10,000 for shares in July is walking down Threadneedle Street, carrying a number he did not expect to carry. The second week of September begins. The memory of the man from July lingers in the back of your mind, but the work does not pause. The transfer ledger fills steadily. The price on the board continues its slow drift downward. Then the drift becomes a steeper movement. Across 3 consecutive days, the price drops sharply. Not in one great movement, but in a series of clear downward steps. Each morning the board shows a lower number than the evening before. Each afternoon it shows a lower number than the morning. The change is too steady to ignore. The counting house is full again. All the scribes are busy. The 2 additional men hired in May work at their desks from morning until evening. The transfer ledger fills faster than it did in the first week. The subscription ledger fills more slowly still. The room is full of activity, but it holds a different kind of silence. People speak in softer voices. Conversations that would have been conducted at normal volume in July are now conducted in near whispers. Men come to the counter and state their business quietly. They do not linger. They transact and leave. The room is crowded but hushed, like a church before a service. No one lingers by the fire. In cooler months past, men would stand near the grate for warmth before going out into the rain. Now they walk directly to the door. The fire crackles on, unattended except by the boy who tends it in the morning. It gives its heat to an empty space. You think about the 20 pounds you earn in a year. It is not much, but it arrives reliably every quarter. It does not go up and down with the price of shares. It does not depend on the mood of men in coffee houses. You have never been grateful for the smallness of your wage before. You are aware of the feeling now, quiet and unformed. A sheet of paper rustles as it is passed across the counter, folded and refolded by nervous fingers. You fill pages with falling numbers. Each transfer entry records a price lower than the one before it. The names move from seller to buyer, and the numbers move down. You write each one carefully, the same neat copperplate script you have used all year. The numbers are different. The hand is the same. Your wrist does not ache, despite the volume of work. Something about the quality of the entries makes them easier to write. Each transfer requires 4 or 5 lines of careful script, but the entries come at a measured pace. There is time between them. Time to think. Time to look up from the page and rest your eyes. You notice that fewer buyers seem to be speculators and more seem to be men of established means. The sellers are a broader mix. Merchants and gentlemen who bought early sell at a profit. Shopkeepers and artisans who bought later sell at a loss. The pattern emerges slowly from the rows of names and numbers, like a picture developing on paper. The chief clerk walks through the room less often now. He spends more time in the director's parlor, or in his own office at the end of the corridor. He passes through once in the morning and once in the afternoon to check the ledgers. He says very little. He nods and moves on. The rain returns in the middle of the week. It falls for 2 days straight, a steady gray drizzle that soaks everything. The streets are perpetually wet. The counting house grows damp. The smell of wet wool and coal smoke hangs in the air. The fire burns a little brighter to chase away the chill, but still no one gathers near it. You eat your midday meal at your desk. The chop house down the street is open, but you do not feel like going out in the rain. You have a piece of bread and a slice of cheese you brought from home. The bread cost a farthing. The cheese cost 2 pence. You eat slowly, watching the rain streak the window glass. Garraway's, you imagine, is very quiet now. Perhaps some of the regulars have stopped going entirely. Perhaps the room sits half empty, the coffee growing cold in untouched cups. Perhaps the newspapers lie on the tables unread, their pages curling at the edges from the steam of abandoned drinks. You do not know. You have not been there since the first week of the month. A quill scratches steadily across the desk to your left. The sound fills the space between the rain and the fire. The price continues to fall. By the end of the week, it has dropped below the price of the third subscription. Men who bought in May and June and held on are now underwater. Underwater means they paid more for their shares than the shares are currently worth. Some of them sell. Some hold on, waiting for a recovery that may or may not come. The boy with the ink bottle moves faster now, though not with the energy of July. He moves with a kind of quiet efficiency, refilling inkwells and tending the fire and running small errands. His work has returned in volume, but the mood of the room has changed. He does not linger by the window anymore. He does not watch the street. He does his work and keeps to himself. The director's parlor sees more visitors than ever. Messengers come and go. Men arrive in coaches and disappear behind the parlor door for long meetings. The sound of voices carries faintly through the wall from time to time, but never clearly enough to understand the words. The door opens and closes with increasing frequency. You think about the ledgers. They have recorded every step of the year. The first subscription at £128. The second at £300. The third at £550. The fourth at £1,000. And now the transfer book, recording the slow journey back down. The ledgers do not judge. They simply record. They hold the names and the numbers and let the story tell itself to anyone who takes the time to read it. A carriage rumbles past outside, its wheels loud on the wet cobblestones. Toward the end of the week, a sell order comes across your desk. You copy the details into the transfer ledger as you have done dozens of times this month. The seller's name catches your attention before you can fully process it. Mr. Thomas Reeves. Haberdasher. 10 shares. You recognize the name from March. He was one of the first ordinary men you noticed subscribing, back when the second subscription opened at £400 per share. A haberdasher with a shop somewhere in the city. He came in with a friend, the tavern keeper Mr. Samuel Broad. Both men subscribed. You remember them because they were not like the merchants and gentlemen who usually came through. They were working men, putting their savings into something they hoped would grow. He is selling now. The price on the order is well below what he paid. Not half, but far enough below 400 that the difference represents months, perhaps years, of careful saving. He is not selling at a profit. He is selling at a loss. You do not know him. You have never spoken to him. You saw him once, 6 months ago, for perhaps 2 minutes. And yet you feel it, quietly, somewhere in your chest. A soft pressure. A faint recognition of what the numbers mean when they attach to real men with real lives and real savings. You finish the entry and blot the page. You set your quill down for a moment and look out the window. The rain has slowed to a fine mist. The light is fading early, as September light does. The transfer ledger sits open before you. More names will come. More numbers will fall. The week is not done. The month is not done. And somewhere in the city, a haberdasher who bought 10 shares in March has sold them again in September, for less than he paid. September gives way to October. The haberdasher's entry sits in the transfer book among dozens of others. The price continues to drift downward, then settles. By the middle of the month, the shares trade near their January price. The number on the board is close to 128 pounds, where it all began. The counting house grows quiet. The transfer entries slow to a trickle. The subscription ledger receives almost no new names. The room that was crowded in July and busy in September now holds only a handful of men at any given time. The echo of footsteps is longer now, with more empty space between the desks. Fewer clerks come in. Some of the men hired during the rush of the third and fourth subscriptions no longer appear. Their desks sit empty, the ledgers closed, the quills put away. No announcement is made. No formal dismissal is given. The work simply diminishes, and the men who were hired for the work diminish with it. The boy with the ink bottle is gone. You do not know when he left. One morning he was simply not there. His small stool by the fire stands empty. No one mentions him. No one asks where he went. He was hired for a rush, and the rush is over. Such is the nature of work that comes and goes with the seasons of commerce. A slow, steady rain falls against the windows. It is October rain, cold and fine. It falls all day, some days. It makes the room feel smaller, more enclosed, more separate from the world outside. You continue copying what entries remain, methodically, as you always have. The work is lighter now. There are long stretches between entries when you sit with an open ledger and a ready quill and nothing to write. You do not mind the quiet. You have worked through noisier months. The stillness is a kind of rest. You think about the year as you sit. January, when the first subscription opened at a price that seemed high at the time. February, when the second subscription filled the staircase. March, when ordinary men began to subscribe. April, when the bubble companies appeared. May, when the third subscription brought crowds. June, when the bubble act passed. July, when the fourth subscription reached 1,000 pounds. August, when the pace slowed. September, when the numbers turned. October, when the rooms emptied. Each month sits in your memory like a page in a book. You can turn to any one of them and find the names and the numbers and the particular quality of the light through the windows. The year is winding down. The great movement of the spring and summer has passed. What remains is the quiet work of closing things out. The fire burns lower each day. The boy who tended it is gone, and no one has taken his place. You add a coal now and then, when you pass the grate. The other scribes do the same. The room is colder than it was. The air holds a damp chill that the fire cannot fully chase away. You pay your rent every Monday as always. 3 shillings and 6 pence. The landlady counts the coins. The amount has not changed. Your wage has not changed. £20 a year, paid quarterly. The South Sea Company still employs scribes. There is still work to do, even if there is less of it. You are grateful for the steadiness. You buy a penny loaf from the baker on the corner most mornings. The bread is warm and crusty. It costs 1 penny. You eat half on the walk to work and save the rest for midday. Small things remain steady while larger things shift. The bread costs the same as it did in January. The rent costs the same. Your wage costs the same. The shares have traveled a great distance and returned to where they started. A page turns somewhere in the quiet room, the sound carrying further than it would in a crowded space. The subscription ledgers sit on their shelves, most of them closed now. Only the transfer book sees regular use, and even that fills more slowly with each passing week. You open it each morning and dip your quill and wait. Sometimes an entry comes within the hour. Sometimes you wait until afternoon. The work arrives when it arrives. You have become accustomed to the rhythm of it. The slower pace suits the season. The days grow shorter. The light fades earlier. The year moves toward its close, and the work of the South Sea House moves with it. There is a rightness to the slowing. Things that rise must also settle. Numbers that climb must also find their level. The rain falls. The fire crackles softly. The room holds its quiet. Outside, the days shorten. Inside, the ledgers wait. The year is nearly done, and so is this story. Whatever remains to be said can wait for another night. Rest now. The ledgers are closed, and so too may you be. The rain continues its soft fall against the glass. The fire settles into embers. The room grows still. Nothing demands attention. Nothing hurries. The year winds down at its own gentle pace. Toward the end of October, the chief clerk comes to your desk. He carries a ring of keys on a brass ring. He tells you to close the subscription ledgers and return them to the strong room. The strong room is a locked chamber at the end of the corridor where important documents and cash are kept for safety. The subscription books have served their purpose for the year. You begin gathering the books. There are 4 of them, one for each money subscription. They are heavy in your arms, bound in dark leather, filled with names and numbers from every month of the year. You close each one carefully, blotting the last page of each before you set it on top of the stack. Each book holds a piece of the year. Each one tells part of the story. A floorboard creaks softly as you stand, the sound loud in the quiet room. You carry the leather-bound books down the corridor. They are warm from sitting on the shelves. Their weight is familiar. You have carried ledgers to and from the strong room many times before. This time feels different, though you cannot say exactly why. As you pass the director's parlor, you hear voices raised inside. Not shouting. Not angry, exactly. But louder than the usual low tones of the room. The words are muffled by the thick door. You cannot make out what is being said. You can only hear the intensity of the voices, the urgency beneath the words. You continue walking. You do not stop. You do not press your ear to the door. It is not your place. You carry the ledgers toward the strong room, the weight of them steady in your arms. The corridor is long and quiet. The sound of the raised voices fades behind you. Ahead, the strong room door waits at the end of the passage. The subscription ledgers will go inside, to be locked away with the other records of the year. You reach the strong room door. The chief clerk follows a moment later with the keys. The ledgers will be placed on the shelf, and the door will be locked, and the year of subscriptions will be finished. Somewhere behind you, down the corridor, the voices in the parlor continue. You do not know what they are saying. You do not need to know. You are a scribe. You copy what is given to you to copy. You close the books when the work is done. November arrives with dampness and short days. The subscription ledgers are locked in the strong room now. Only the transfer book remains open on your desk, and even that receives few entries. The counting house is very quiet. The morning of the last entry is much like the morning of the first entry, 10 months before. A fine rain falls steadily. The light through the tall windows is gray and soft. The air smells of damp stone and coal smoke. You arrive at the usual hour, remove your coat, and take your seat at the same oak desk. The room is emptier than it has been all year. Only 3 of the original scribes remain. The desks hired in May stand vacant. The chief clerk passes through once in the morning and once in the afternoon. The porter sits by the door, watching the rain. The rush and the noise and the crowds of summer feel very far away. There is one entry to make before the year's books can be closed. A final transfer, processed at the end of October and recorded now on the 1st of November. You open the transfer ledger and dip your quill. The iron gall ink is the same ink you have used all year. The quill is a new one, cut the evening before. You pay your quarterly wage the week before, received in full from the chief clerk's office. £20 per year, divided into 4 equal payments. The coins are heavy in their paper wrap. You count them carefully before locking them away in your small box at the garret. The wage has not changed. It will not change, so long as the work remains. A distant bell tolls the hour from a church tower somewhere beyond Threadneedle Street. The sound is muffled by the rain. You write the last entry slowly and carefully. The seller's name. The buyer's name. The number of shares. The agreed price. Each letter forms neatly beneath your hand. The copperplate script is the same script you have used all year. The hand has not changed. Only the numbers have traveled. You think about the first entry you made in January. Mr. Edward H. Arlo, 50 shares, £128 each. That same name has appeared and reappeared through the months. He sold 20 shares in September, at a price well above what he paid. He kept 30. You do not know whether he still holds them. The books will tell, if anyone takes the time to read them. You finish the last line and set the quill down. You take the blotting paper from the corner of your desk and press it gently against the wet ink. The paper absorbs the excess, leaving the words crisp and dark on the page. You lift the blotter and set it aside. You close the book. The leather cover settles with a soft thud. The sound is final in the quiet room. The last open ledger of the year is closed. The 4 subscription ledgers are already in the strong room. The transfer book will join them tomorrow. The work of the year is done. You sit for a moment watching rain streak the tall windows. The drops run down the glass in long, wavering lines. They meet and merge and continue downward. The street outside is softened by the rain. Figures pass in coats and hats, their outlines blurred at the edges. The numbers have come home. After all the movement of the year, after the rise and the fall and the long slow settling, the price stands near where it began. The journey has been long. The destination is familiar. The shares that started the year at £128 ended at something close to the same number. You think about all the names you have written. The merchants and the gentlemen. The haberdashers and the tavern keepers. The widows and the sea captains and the clerks. Each name represents a decision made, a hope held, a sum paid. Some profited. Some did not. Some sold early and walked away. Some held on and saw the numbers turn. Each story is there, between the lines of the ledger. The fire at the far end of the room crackles softly, the only other sound in the counting house. You think about the system itself. The company. The shares. The ledgers. The mechanism by which money moves from hand to hand and value rises and falls according to the beliefs of men. It is neither good nor bad. It simply is, like the tide or the weather. It moves according to its own nature, and men move with it, or against it, or are carried along by it. The year H has been a lesson in what happens when optimism outruns reality, and what happens when reality reasserts itself. The pattern is old, you suspect. Older than the South Sea Company. Older than the joint stock form itself. Men have always believed things can only rise, and they have always been reminded otherwise. The names change. The companies change. The shape of the movement remains the same. You sit and watch the rain. The room is very still. The books are closed. The work of the year is done. Outside, the November day grows slowly darker. The light through the windows dims by degrees. The rain continues its steady fall. You leave the South Sea House at the usual hour. You collect your coat from the hook by the door. You nod to the porter. You step out onto Threadneedle Street. The rain has lightened but not stopped. The cobblestones glisten. Puddles hold reflections of the gray sky. The street is quieter than it was in July, quieter even than in September. Most businesses have closed for the day. A few lamps burn in doorways, their flames small and steady in the damp air. You walk through the wet streets toward your garret. The route is the same one you have walked every working day of the year. Lombard Street. Cornhill. The narrow lane where you live. Each corner is familiar. Each step is the same step you took in January, and in March, and in July. You pass the coachmaker's shop where you saw the subscription list taped to the door in July. The door is closed now. No list is taped to it. The shop is dark inside. You walk on. You pass Garraway's coffee house. A few lights burn in the windows. You can see the shapes of men sitting at tables, but the room looks emptier than it did at the height of the year. The coffee house will continue. The men will come and go. The conversations will shift to other subjects. Life moves on, even after the numbers settle. You turn into the lane where you live. The stairs to your garret wait at the end. 3 shillings and 6 pence a week. The same rent you paid in January. The same room. The same view of the neighboring rooftop and the patch of sky above it. You wonder, quietly, without urgency, what next year's ledgers will hold.